In 1994, a scary statement was made by a British rock star to a documentary crew. He wanted Phil Collins's head in his fridge by the end of the decade. He wasn't joking when he called Phil the Antichrist of music. It wasn't just this star. Another grunge icon said he'd only wear tie-dye if it was dyed with Phil's urine. A reality TV judge was called cruel by Phil. Even his childhood hero was humiliated. Born on January 30, 1940 in Chiswick, West London, to parents Greville, an insurance man, and June, a theatrical agent, Phil Collins grew up immersed in a creative and structured environment. His mom's job made it normal for him to talk about showbiz at home, and he went on to become the most hated musician alive. Phil was unknowingly receiving a backstage education in the entertainment industry from his parents and grandparents, who often discussed stage schedules and performances over dinner. By the time he was 5 years old, something clicked. He received a toy drum kit. His parents also taught him how to deal with agents, find good deals, and manage a crowd. While on a family vacation at Butlins that same year, Phil entered a talent contest. The orchestra started playing behind him, but they were in the wrong key. Little Phil stepped in and told the musicians they were off key. The audience couldn't believe it, but it ignited a fire in him, proved something significant. Phil didn't merely hear music, he comprehended it. His timing, pitch, and guts were remarkable, and everyone around him never looked at him the same way. By the time Phil was in his early teens, he was already performing for large audiences. He portrayed the Artful Dodger in the London stage production of Oliver, a challenging role that required charisma and swagger. He also appeared as an extra in Tit. While in school, Phil wasn't merely acting, he was also forming bands, his first serious group being The Real Thing, and he had his first taste of the entertainment industry when he filmed scenes for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but had them cut. This was in 1964, when he was a member of the Beatles. Phil Collins, the songwriter, frontman, and artist, began with his first song, Lying, Crying, Dying. The title was dramatic, but the emotions it conveyed were genuine. This marked the beginning of his career, which had previously been defined by his work with the early band Freehold. Then the moment that changed everything came. At a friend's house on June 28, 1970, Phil saw a classified ad in Melody Maker that said Genesis was looking for a drummer who was sensitive to acoustic music and 12-string guitar. At the tender age of 19, Phil made his way to Surrey to audition at Peter Gabriel's parents' house, where the 6-hour process began. During the audition, he played drums, sang backing vocals. Phil's 3 albums from 1971 to 1973, which defined Genesis's prog rock era nursery, were defined by his drumming on the musical box, his vocals, and the rhythm section. The group hired him for $10 per week, which wasn't enough to live on, so he continued working at a music store for a while. Once he was in, though, Genesis was never the same. In 1972, he released Foxtrot, which featured on Supper's Ready, a song that many fans hailed as the best of its kind, and held it all together for over 20 minutes, seamlessly blending 44, 78, and even 908 time signatures. In 1973, while performing at the Battle of Epping Forest, he utilized 47 percussion instruments, and his 23-minute track became iconic. In August 1975, Genesis hit a wall when Peter Gabriel left. No one knew if the band could survive. They launched a massive audition process to find a new singer. 400 people came and went. Each one had to sing 3 complex Genesis tracks. They brought in names, but Tony could play anything from the vibraphone to kitchen utensils. Just like Mick Strickland and Fish from Marillion, Phil had been singing backup for years, but it wasn't until he tried lead vocals that something clicked again. On February 3, 1976, he auditioned for real, and 4 hours later, it was done. His rendition of In the Cage gave the band chills, revealing the truth they had all along desired him since week 3, but continued to seek confirmation. Little did anyone know that Phil had a double life at the time. In 1975, he joined the jazz fusion band Brand X, and while Genesis recorded Wind and Weathering during the day, he would practice or perform with Brand X at night. On occasion, he would work 18 hours straight on the drums until his body gave out, and they released their first album. His 12-minute solo on 1977's Why Should I Lend You Mine was one of the most challenging drum pieces in jazz fusion history. It had time signatures like 17/16 and 2/38, and it shocked musicians. Phil Collins didn't intend to become one of the most famous figures of the 1980s. It all began with heartbreak in early 1979, when his marriage to Andrea Bertoelli fell apart. He returned to his bride's tradition. Instead of crumbling under the weight of his anguish, Phil redirected it into music. He brought an 1820s piano into his bedroom and added a drum machine. There was no band or other distractions, just Phil and the rubble of his life. On February 13, 1981, a day before Valentine's Day, he released Face Value, his debut solo album. It was far from polished, but it was Phil's way of working through his pain. The song wasn't sugary, it was honest, raw, and emotional. In August, it reached #1 on the Hot 100, in stark contrast to Endless Love by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie, which was sitting at #1. Collins, however, tore it apart with ominous drums and haunting silence, destroying the world's celebrated romance. The sound originated from a Shepherd's Bush studio, where Collins was recording with Peter Gabriel. Producer Hugh Pegum had inadvertently connected a talking mic to another microphone, but the result was a magical effect. The compressed and gated mic eliminated echo, transforming each drum hit into an unprecedentedly explosive sound. I've heard drums like that before, but when they used the effect on In the Air Tonight, the world took notice. That sound, called gated reverb, became iconic of 1980s pop and rock. Genesis used it in Mama. It was soon copied by everyone until the 90s, when bands wanted a more natural sound. Even today, artists use it. The return of artists like Beyoncé and Lorde demonstrates the extent to which Collins' mistake went. His 1982 album, Hello I Must Be Going, was full of soul, rhythm, and heart. It peaked at #2 in the UK and 8 in the US. His cover of You Can't Hurry Love reached #1 in Britain. Then, in 1985, came No Jacket Required, and everything changed. After a while, Collins wanted a more upbeat sound, so he recruited Sting and Peter Gabriel to provide backing vocals and leaned into dance tracks. The album was a smash, spending 5 weeks at the top of the UK charts and 7 in the US. It sold over 12 million copies in the US and was nominated for 3 Grammys, including Album of the Year. In that same year, Collins had 3 #1 hits. From 1984 to 1990, he was unstoppable. Despite all odds, he scored 13 top 10 hits in the US, which provided him with his first solo #1 in America. The song earned him a Grammy, but the Oscars passed him by. Collins never forgot the incident and joked about it on stage for years. In 1977, with the release for die-hard Genesis fans, the release of And Then There Were Three was a betrayal. Instead of complex, 10-minute songs about mythical beasts and dying kings, they were treated to simple love songs whose sting never went away. Follow You, Follow Me, on the other hand, was catchy, soft, and pop. Under Collins' direction, the band shifted from a complicated, male-heavy sound to one that was proudly uncommercial. This new sound appealed to a wider audience, particularly women, and the band's popularity grew. However, early fans felt like the band was losing its soul. In 1986, the band released Invisible Touch, a full-blown pop record, and its title track exploded, hitting #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100. Prior to the album's 6 million US copy sales and 1 million more copies sold worldwide, never had done it. The album's 5 singles reached #5 in the US, 2 million in the UK, and 5 in the country of uncertainty. Tonight, all chart monsters, Collins subsequently revealed that the title song was inspired by Sheila E.'s The Glamorous. Collins' favorite song was born during a jam session when the band was simply experimenting. Mike Rutherford praised it as a great song that was a joy to play. Fans were divided, but the chart showed that Invisible Touch was the top song on July 19, 1986, with Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer 2 coming in at #2. From the mid-1980s onward, Phil Collins had surpassed Genesis in popularity. His solo debut, Face Value, topped the UK charts for 3 weeks and reached #7 in the US. His next single, In the Air Tonight, became a global hit with an iconic eerie drum break. More hits followed. Collins had more top 40 singles in the US than anyone else when Genesis reunited in late 1985 to make Invisible Touch. His albums, including Hello I Must Be Going and No Jacket Required, were all multi-platinum. Collins was not only doing well, he was dominating. No one was happy about the success. In fact, many hated it. Collins became a symbol of betrayal, but Mike Rutherford acknowledged that the surprise was that Collins stayed for so long. I'm happy with what we're doing now, he said, but everyone knew it couldn't endure forever. In 1996, Collins finally left. I'm sorry that it was all so successful. I honestly didn't mean it to happen like that. In American Psycho, Patrick Bateman rants about Phil Collins before killing someone, making it clear that Collins was the target of people's fatigue by 2010. Phil Collins, who had come to idolize the Beatles as a child, met Paul McCartney at Buckingham Palace in 2002 with a first edition of the Beatles biography, in the hopes of receiving a signature.
but instead received nothing but scorn. Even South Park joined in mocking him, painting him as a washed-up star who could only be enjoyed while high on medication. While speaking to his wife Heather, McCartney smirked and said, "Oh Heather, our little Phil's a bit of a Beatles fan." This statement stunned Collins, who felt insulted that he was being made fun of for simply appreciating the music of a group he had listened to as a child. Years later, Collins confessed that he never forgot that moment, saying "you fa." For Collins, the comment had lingered for too long. He wasn't merely bitter, he was hurt. And when you're in a field where ego is paramount, it festered. When McCartney eventually reached out, it wasn't really an apology. Rather, it felt more like, let's move on. Collins made it clear in 2005 that he had no patience for Simon Cowell or his cruel style of music. Collins claimed that Cowell had told a woman who sang on boats, "I'd never go on a boat you were singing on because it would sink." This incident stuck with Collins, and he went on to accuse Cowell of being cruel and unforgiving. Collins said, "Going on one of those shows would feel like banging my head against the wall." He rejected offers to appear on talent shows like American Idol because to him they were lifeless formats where artistry was irrelevant and ratings were more important. The problem for Collins wasn't just the cowl, it was the factory styles. British pop music emerged in the 80s and 90s, and Noel Gallagher, lead singer of Oasis, made Phil Collins an individual target. In the early 90s, Gallagher declared war on what he called McDonald's music, with Collins and Sting being at the top of his list. By the end of the decade, Gallagher expressed his disapproval in a documentary, The Crew in 1994. "If I haven't, I'll be a failure." Gallagher later softened a bit, admitting he was being dramatic, but he never really let up. Collins didn't hold back either. He kept calling the Oasis brothers the Antichrist of music. Despite admitting he liked their music, he rolled his eyes at Froe. In a 1992 interview, the lead singer of Nirvana unleashed a tirade that savagely attacked Collins' persona, mocking white male soul cartoons, horns, and tie-dye shirts. It wasn't just personal, it was generational. Britpop desired rebellion, and Collins embodied polished pop from the old guard, were stained with the bile of Phil Collins and Jerry Garcia's blood. Cobain didn't despise Collins the man, but he despised the commercial pop that Collins personified, soulless, inauthentic, and concerned only with taste rather than values. To Cobain, Collins represented everything that grunge was fighting to destroy. Even though they never actually clashed, Cobain's words stuck. Collins has been through a tumultuous marriage history, with the first ending in 1980 and the second costing him $17 million, approximately $34 million. However, the most shocking split occurred in 2008 when he divorced Orion Civi, costing him $36 million. Collins' personal pain was just as public as his public pain. After a brief reconciliation with CV in the late 90s, Collins lost nearly $84 million, almost a third of his fortune in divorce settlements. The headlines weren't kind, they called him unlucky in love. The situation became even worse after McCartney's high-profile payout to Heather Mills was smaller. She allegedly hired armed guards, blocked security cameras, and changed the locks on Collins' $40 million Miami mansion after she unexpectedly dumped him over text in the 2010s and married another man in Las Vegas. Collins allegedly accused her of staging a takeover, and CVI demanded $20 million, claiming Collins had promised her half of the home's value. Collins denied the accusation. It was no longer just a divorce, it had escalated into a full-scale war when the woman Collins had trusted threatened to divulge private information unless he paid. The legal battle continued until 2022, when a judge dismissed Stevie's claims following her repeated violations of court orders. However, by then, the harm had already been done. Collins had been publicly humiliated once again. In her 2017 memoir, she wrote, "I forgive you for not always being there when I needed you." In it, she discussed her struggles with insecurity, an eating disorder, and the emotional void left by her parents' divorce when she was 5 years old. Since then, she has become a famous actress and has spoken candidly about the strain on her relationship with her father. Lily stood by her father's side at his last Genesis concert, describing him as her hero. However, the road back was long, and she still bears the weight of what was lost amid all of this, beyond the fame, the fortune, and the constant reminders that he was still alive, but it felt like he had disappeared. The pain was raw, but it was honest. Eventually, they started to rebuild. He started drinking wine around 11 a.m., a sign that he was battling to keep himself together after his third divorce, grudges, and gossip. Collins went apart after this. Phil Collins wasn't merely a rock celebrity. Following that, he almost died from pancreatitis, nerve damage, and an inability to drum. His 1988 film Buster was an audacious step into acting, and he played the role of Buster Edwards, a conspirator in the infamous Great Train Robbery of 1963. The picture was a commercial success, grossing over $540,000 in the United States alone, but it was the soundtrack, featuring Collins' rendition of a groovy. Collins accomplished the rare feat of becoming a successful actor and musician simultaneously with the release of Kind of Love, which went on to reach #1 in both the UK and the US. A song from the film Two Hearts also reached #1 on the US Billboard charts and even won a Golden Globe. Collins continued to achieve great success in 1999 when he collaborated with Disney on In 2000 for the animated film Tarzan, he composed and performed the heartfelt ballad You'll Be in My Heart. The song remained at the top of the adult contemporary chart for 19 weeks, and Collins's extraordinary vocal versatility, he sang it himself in French, German, and Italian, won him an Academy Award for Best Original Song in both English and Spanish that contributed to the soundtrack's 2 Collins continued to surprise audiences in 1985 with his appearance in Miami Vice as a dazzling con artist, despite having already achieved something very few ever do, selling 5 million copies in the US alone and earning a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Golden Globe. Fans of the artist weren't expecting to see the legendary rock star in a crime drama, but he absolutely nailed it. A few years later, he had a brief but entertaining appearance as a police inspector in Spielberg's Hook. In 1993, he tackled the darker subject in the AIDS crisis film, and the band played on, playing the owner of a San Francisco bathhouse. This role demonstrated that he wasn't scared of serious or reeful wear. In touch with his musical side, as he composed the songs Look Through My Eyes and Welcome for Disney's Brother Bear in 2003, which received a Grammy nomination and sold over 500,000 copies. Collins's appearances in these films demonstrated that he was more than just an actor dabbling in comedy, drama, and everything in between. In the United States, he made an appearance on The Simpsons, playing a cameo role. His 2007 Cadbury commercial featuring a gorilla drummer catapulted his song In the Air Tonight to even greater fame. His songs continued to appear in various shows, ads, and movies, proving that his sound was constantly in the spotlight, even though he was physically suffering behind the scenes. He began playing the drums at the age of 50 and continued until 2007, when, while touring with Genesis, he dislocated a vertebrae in his neck, causing severe nerve damage. By the late 60s, he had no choice but to stop playing drums altogether due to his inability to hold the sticks properly. The loss was devastating for someone whose identity was built around rhythm, but he refused to quit. He underwent major surgeries in 2009 and 2016, but neither procedure improved his condition. In 2019, he developed drop foot, which made walking difficult. He needed a cane. On stage at a concert in 2019, he even fell backwards off a chair, but he adapted, and he started seating. Fans were taken aback by his transformation. He no longer embodied the energetic man they remembered. Despite this, his voice and passion remained unchanged. In 2020, Genesis reunited for a 13-year tour, titled The Last Domino, which traversed North America and Europe. The tour, which ran from late 2021 to early 2020, and featured 47 shows, was accompanied by his son Nick, transitioned to drums as Phil honed his vocal skills. This was their final tour together, and Phil announced that he was done. The pandemic delayed their plans, but they eventually completed what they had begun. Seeing Collins perform again despite the emotions gave fans a sense that they were witnessing the end of an era. In 2016, Collins released his memoir, Not Dead Yet, which aptly described his determination. This book was an incredibly open and honest look at his lowest point, covering topics such as his health, his divorces, his regrets, and his struggle with alcohol. He had been married 3 times before this, but after his third wife left, he went into a downward spiral, drinking heavily and feeling like he had lost his music, his family, and his purpose in life.